Hi, we continue in 1 Samuel 2 today as we explore the narrator's strategy here of raising up Hannah and Samuel and taking down Eli and his sons. And this will be setting up Samuel to be the kingmaker, but it'll take till chapter 8 that we get there. So let's pick up where we left off here in chapter 2, verse 18. Just as a reminder, the last scene we were at here involved the sin of the young men, which is to say, Eli's sons great in the sight of the Lord, and that will pick up. To remind us of the plot sequence here, we're going to be looking at these three sections today. This is just one verse, of course, framing Eli upbraiding his corrupt son. So we'll see how, as this plot unfolds, Samuel rises in stature and Eli literally falls down. So here we have the Hebrew text to follow along with. So Samuel is ministering before the Lord, and that recalls that 2:11 when we were told that he was brought there to minister to the Lord in the presence of the priest Eli. So he's continuing to do that, and we're told he's wearing a linen ephod. And unfortunately, I can't share a picture of an ancient linen ephod with you, because if you look online, what you see are fanciful images of the priestly ephod described in detail in the book of Exodus. But clearly the priestly ephod was something very fancy and designed for ritual purposes. And although Samuel is ministering before Yahweh as an apprentice to a priest, that sense of priestly ephod was for a much later time. As Polson notes, the ephod material is a material worn only by priests, angels, and David. And here it's suggesting that Samuel is playing a priestly role, although the text just told us that he was rising as a prophet. Again, Samuel's status in terms of his role will be highly ambiguous throughout this entire book, or throughout the book, the part that Samuel's in at least. So we're told he's wearing an ephod, and that won't be the only thing that he'll be wearing, so let's continue. His mother used to make for him a little robe, and the word for used to, as Samora helpfully notes here, stands for a customary action in the past. In other words, made it a custom to. And it's clear that she took it to him each year, suggesting that as he grows, he outgrows them. So it's not like one robe she made him, that she made him a robe each year. And the word for robe here, melil, is a garment also otherwise worn by priests or men of rank. So, for example, here it's connected with the ephod here in the descriptions of all these fancy vestments for the Aaronids, the sons of Aaron, Moses' brother, who were the priests. In this book, we will see another, in the book of 1 Samuel, we'll see a number of other robes, as we see here. Saul caught a hold of his robe and tore it, so we'll see that later. But now, as a child, this is the robe that his mother makes him. So two garments that suggest some kind of priestly role for him at this point. What the relationship is between his wearing the ephod and wearing the robe is not clear. And now we're told that she went up with her husband, and notice how Peninnah and her whole family of children have just completely disappeared out of the picture. It's as if they don't exist anymore. The tormentor has been removed from the text. So Eli would bless, and the would bless here suggests that this is a yearly thing. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the gift that she made to the Lord." And that's ambiguous here as to what Eli's praying for. One option here is that since the Masoretic text, the Hebrew here, which you can see, I won't read it all to you, is problematic. Samora in a note argues for this translation, "May the Lord grant you offspring of this woman in place of the one who is entrusted to the Lord." So that's taking this for the gift, like in exchange for this gift. So not in the sense of you gave us something and we're going to, God will repay you, but because you've given us a child that you've now lost, may Yahweh repay you with children. And we're told she has 5 more children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, but they're never mentioned again. Samuel never refers to brothers and sisters, and they just completely disappear out of the plot. So it says Yahweh took note of Hannah. Here, the word paqued here, otherwise used in military context. The Hebrew has a number of stems by which verbs are listed. The most common active one is qual, as you can see on the screen, and there are many others. This is a nifal in the sense of an active step by somebody, but the meaning in the nifal, different than the meaning in the qual, can mean to muster or count troops. So we see a number of examples of that, mustering troops here and a number of examples of that same kind of thing, counting the army here. So not exactly a census, but finding out how many soldiers you have before you go into war. So that suggests a martial context, which is going to actually fit something that we'll see surprising in just a minute. So Yahweh took note of Hannah as if it was a general taking note of his soldiers. And I'd also note that it echoes Genesis 21. The word is the same here, even though the New Revised Standard translated as the Lord dealt with Sarah and did for Sarah as he had promised, and she conceived and bore Abraham a son. So again, matters which one you think was written first. If the Genesis story is an exilic story, then probably it's meant to echo the story here. But we can't know that for sure. So Yahweh took note of Hannah, and she conceived and bore these sons, and the boy grew up in the presence of Yahweh. And even though the New Revised Standard has used this phrase, presence of the Lord, before, it's a different word this time. Here it's im Yahweh as opposed to le panah Yahweh. So earlier it was in the face of Yahweh here. In the presence of the Lord. Same exact phrase in English, but different here. Im has the sense of an intimate relationship, so it's not like it's diminishing that, but it's not as specific as the presence in the face. And why the author chose to change the word there, you'd have to ask them, and I guess we can't. So Eli was very old. Notice that Samuel is growing young, and Eli is growing old, or growing up from being young. Rather, he's not growing young, but growing up from being young. And Eli is described as very old. So Ken Mayad, and as Polzin notes, a comment both on the status of judgeship from the perspective of the beginning and monarchy from the perspective of exile, which is to say, now the judgeship is about to pass over into monarchy. The judgeship is very old. But if we see Eli as a stand-in for monarchy from the time of the monarchy's failing, time to the Babylonian exile in the 6th century, then we can hear it that way. Polzin is really very good at noting how many of these stories can operate by hearing them at different time levels. And we'll see that in detail as we go. So Eli is very old. He heard, and this is in contrast with his blindness. So he was blind and he couldn't hear Hannah's prayer. He thought she was drunk, but now he hears the rumors of what's going on. He heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel. As Rachel Gilmore notes here, Eli is physically blind, morally blind, and sees no prophetic visions. Furthermore, this is symptomatic of Israel as a whole, to the extent that Eli is representing the condition here. They're not listening to Yahweh, and they can't see either. And he's heard that the sons were doing this to all Israel, which is the first time we're hearing of all Israel, and the first of several references to Israel in this section. So in 228, we'll hear about the tribes of Israel, then the people of Israel, the God of Israel, the elders of Israel. All Israel is a number of times, including 324:1, etc. All Israel is a term, referring to the populace as a whole, as opposed to some distinct subgroup like priests or elders and such. And it really implies that this shrine at Shiloh was serving a large number of people. Note at the beginning, it was simply Hannah praying quietly and Elkanah bringing up sacrifices, and then we heard that others were there, and then there were Eli's sons, and we're about to hear that there are women there, and so it's expanding in a sense of what it is as the story unfolds. We still don't know exactly what it is, but it's clearly serving a wider population than it seemed like at the beginning. So he heard that all his sons, heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of the meeting. Laying with the women who served here has several layers of meaning. It's literally here Eli's son lying down with the temple prostitutes, assuming that's what they are, but it's not clear at all what the women who served at the entrance are meant to do. It also has to do with Eli lying down because of his age, which we'll see just momentarily in 3:2. His eyesight had begun to grow dim, and he was lying down in his room. And also Samuel will lie down because of his youth, so he will lie down in the temple of the Lord and discover Yahweh calling him. So various issues of laying down. The fact that they lay with the women does not at all suggest, though, that these were temple prostitutes, and that's questionable at many levels of whether such a thing ever existed in Israel and whether it existed in Shiloh in particular. It implies more that his sons are simply taking advantage of these women who are performing some kind of unknown service there. The word for service here is a really interesting one. we recall that Hannah referred to God as Yahweh Sabaoth, a God of hosts or of armies, and the Sabaoth is exactly the same word that's being used here. So as Bodner notes, Eli's sons lie with the host of women while not knowing the Lord of hosts. One of the many kind of word plays that the Hebrew text engages in that are often hidden in the translations. So a second martial implication here, both the Yahweh taking note that had the sense of mustering troops, and now these women who are suggesting somehow a vague military role for them at the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting, an incredibly popular term in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, is only here in Samuel and only in 1 Kings here in the ceremony that establishes the temple under Solomon, the Jerusalem temple under Solomon. So it was the place of intimacy between Moses and God and Moses and the people, or Yahweh and the people often. But in the Deuteronomistic history, it's so rare. It's only here at the very end of Deuteronomy when Yahweh said to Moses, "Your time to die is near. Call Joshua and present yourself in the tent of meeting." But note, if we just search for it more broadly, we can see how maybe you can't see that small print on your screen, but these are all Exodus. You can see the exo. They're all references in Exodus, and look how many. Then Leviticus, and you can see how many, and then Numbers, and you can see how many. And then when it gets through all of those, you see just once in Deuteronomy, twice in Joshua, once in Samuel. So a very common word in the Torah wilderness tradition, the sense of Yahweh meeting with people in the tent. And that image also comes up at the very end of the Bible in Revelation 21, when it says that God tented, using the Greek verb, in the midst of the people in the street of the holy city, New Jerusalem. So a long stretch for the phrase tent of meeting. But it's unusual here, especially in a story that anticipates monarchy, where the ultimate goal here will be Yahweh enshrined in a grand royal temple. So, in addition to the fact that they took the meat that didn't belong to them, now they're engaging in sexual abuse with the women at the tent. We could imply an echo there of the horrible story we looked at before from Judges 19 to 21 about the concubine who was raped. It certainly does not portray Eli's sons in any good light at all. And notice that they don't even respond. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things?" And literally in the Hebrew, it's about words. Literally, why do you make such words? Kadavarim, which echoes the evil words he's hearing about them. So although the new RSV suggests it's things and dealings, in both cases it's words. Why do you make such words? And which echoes with the evil words that he hears about them. Word in that sense, of course, is not just simply the words. Whether the authors of 1 Samuel carried the same powerful sense that the authors of Genesis 1 do, that God's words bring things into being. Certainly word acts were an understood function of life. So it's what they're saying and makes things happen. And he says, "No, my sons, it is not a good report or good news." Hashmuah here is used a couple other times. Later on, we'll see the veracity of reports will shape actions, whether reports about Absalom or reports about Saul. So much of what will go on in a royal context is people not hearing directly, needing to send agents that they're not sure they can trust, or getting reports from agents that they aren't even sure who they are, upon which they have to make decisions. So it's the introducing of that theme here. And you notice there's several aspects of the royal military context that are being subtly incorporated into the text here. So, "No, my sons, it is not good report or good news that I hear the people of Yahweh spreading abroad." And that's the first time we hear that. It's not clear where abroad means. When we look at the map, we know that these are not countries the way we have now. We saw that these little towns of Ramah and Shiloh are up in this central area north of Jerusalem, north of the Dead Sea, but there's no country and there's no clear sense of national identity yet. What would it be gathered around? Again, it depends on whether we know Joshua and Judges, or whether we sense 12 tribe collaboration here. But we don't see that anywhere. There's no references to the 12 tribes, so we just don't know. So, any event, the word is spreading. It's not just locally here in Shiloh, but the word that the priesthood is gone bad is spreading. And maybe that's a thought that the author is putting about things going bad in Israel spreading to their neighbors in Canaan, or maybe even spreading to their neighbors in the larger places like Egypt or Babylon at a different time period. And then Eli continues here with a statement that has no context for it. We don't know whose theology it is. This is certainly not biblical theology. And he says it as if it's a rhetorical question that we already know the answer to, but it's not at all clear. So let's listen to what he says. If one person sins against another, someone can intercede for the sinner with Yahweh. But if someone sins against Yahweh, who can make intercession? Is that really right here? We can note this as a programmatic statement regarding the monarchy, with Samuel as the father in that case. In other words, if people end up with a king, sin against Yahweh by having a monarchy, who do they have to complain about and to complain to? And of course they won't. But in this case, the sense of sinning against another and sinning against the Lord and interceding is exactly what Samuel will do. So we'll see here in chapter 7, verse 6. So they gathered in Mizpah and drew water and poured it out before Yahweh. They fasted a day and said, "We have sinned against Yahweh." And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah, and then cried out and offered intercession for them. In other words, he does exactly what Eli's seemingly rhetorical question suggests can't be done, further underscoring Eli's incompetence here. He doesn't understand that, yes, people can intercede before Yahweh for sins done against Yahweh. This is the first time hot as a verb is used. We saw it earlier as a noun. The next is that very passage I just showed you in 7:6, so a clear connection here between Eli's question and Samuel's answer refuting the premise of the question. It's also used a number of times, and as we explore, it'll be interesting to see what acts are deemed to be sins along the way. In any event, the sons would not listen to the voice of their father, anticipating the people's refusal to listen to Samuel here, as we see when they ask for a king. So again, this is all filling in Polson's view that these early stories of Hannah and Elkanah and such are a little parable or allegory about the monarchy, at least anticipating it as a prologue. So the sons won't listen to the voice of their father, and the people will not listen to the voice of Samuel or to the voice of God. And then we get something chilling, for it was the will of Yahweh to kill them. And that, of course, fills in something we went past earlier in the chapter and maybe didn't think too hard about when Hannah's prayer said, "The Lord kills and brings to life," and it's exactly the same form of the word here. And so here it is. It was the will of Yahweh to kill them. That might not fit your theology. It doesn't fit the theology of other parts of the Bible, but it's certainly clear that that's what's being named here from this author, that was the will of Yahweh to kill them. We'll see other examples of a theology that may make some of us squirm, for example, later when Yahweh sends an evil spirit on Saul. If you were raised in a Christian context, you probably weren't expecting that God sends evil spirits on people, but this text is not a Christian text. So we need to remember that along the way. Its theology does not necessarily fit your theology. So it was the will of Yahweh to kill Eli's sons, and after all, it's not arbitrary. They are causing a lot of trouble, and to the women and to the people. And that ends that section, and yet the juxtaposition is sharp. So it's the will of Yahweh to kill the sons of Eli, but the son of Hannah continued to grow both in stature and in favor with Yahweh and with the people. And a couple of things to note here. This echoes, again, as we saw, Hannah's song echoed in Mary's Magnificat and in the characters of Anna and Elizabeth in Luke 1 and 2. Similarly, the story of Samuel echoes. So note the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor. And before we look at the Luke parallel, note that the Hebrew is ambiguous here. The Holeg Vigadol Vatav Gam Im Yahweh could also be grew great and good with Yahweh. So it's not necessarily stature, just grew great, and it's implying stature there. But grew greater in the eyes of Yahweh and the people. And so we see in Luke 2:40, the child Jesus grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and God's favor is upon him. And then just down a few verses, Jesus increased in wisdom and years and in divine and human favor. So again, Jesus is clearly portrayed by Luke as parallel to Samuel in many ways. And that ends our scene. And so we will take it up next time as a man of God, and we'll have to see what it means by a man of God, upbraids Eli, and Eli's situation grows steadily worse. So hang in there, and we'll continue our story next time. Take care. Bye-bye.